Welcome to Groups This Week. As a church, we exist to help all people become fully devoted followers of Jesus. We believe doing life together is a crucial part of that journey. During this time, we're going to unpack and dig deeper into the sermon we heard this past week. Let's dive in as we continue to grow in our faith, knowledge, and love of Jesus together.
Hey, and welcome groups, and welcome Brad.
Hey, man.
Back to the studio.
Good to be here.
Awesome. Well, hey, this week we were in Romans 13, which is a very relevant chapter, given that we just had an election.
Yeah.
Because Romans 13 talks about submission to the authorities.
Mm-hmm.
And so, man, what an interesting chapter. Now, as we look at this, like, how does Romans 13 inform the way that we relate to the state and those in governing authority?
Yeah. Well, I think we need to be careful, first of all, just to take it out of context, which is often the case. And throughout history, it's been done, where it has to do with divine right of kings in Europe, Nazi Germany, apartheid in South Africa. This actual text has been used many times to say, hey, just listen, God has put this government here, so you obey. So there's obviously some very dangerous ways that the text can be used. I think also we can go the opposite route, and I think this is what Paul is after, is that listen, I'm a citizen of heaven. I have nothing to do with what's going on here, so I'm just going to completely cut myself off from that. And if you look at what's going on in context, I mean, between the end and of course we have it in chapters, so it makes we always cut off Paul's arguments and we think it's just starting something new.
Right.
But he's coming out of this idea of being living sacrifices that wholly give ourselves over to God and His mission for the world, ourselves and for the world. That would include our country or our municipality or whatever. And then this whole call at the second half of chapter 12 to love in action. Okay, and part of that, he seems to suggest, is submitting to whichever government well, okay, now that's the whole other thing, because it would be another.
Caveats, yeah.
Well, the way that we look at 13 is immediately we try to apply it to today. Now, the governments that we have today, it would be about 1700 years before democracy would show up.
Right.
So for the church to start using this in a way, and so trying to apply it to today is definitely difficult.
Okay.
But what I would suggest is the argument here that Paul's going to, and then when he gets into verse 10, after he talks about submission, he talks about ultimately that no authority is given other than God giving that authority. So that's something we have to keep in mind. Goes into, I think it's verse 8, where he talks about, no, not verse 8, it talks about the sword, that the government is not given the sword. How is it worded there? Sorry, my mind. In verse 4, they do not bear the sword for no reason. Now we immediately go to capital punishment. We go to
It's not that.
It's not that. That kind of phrase has this idea of like the authority. They're not given authority for no reason.
Yeah.
Now where Paul goes into this whole argument, it actually leads to verse 6, which has to do with taxes. Now, I know this is going on, but it's important. Okay?
Reminds us of Jesus here.
Yes. So give to Caesar what's Caesar's and give to God. And God's talking about, and Jesus there is talking about an image. So the image of Caesar is on the coins, give to Caesar. The image of God is in you, so give yourself to God. Now, in this case, taxes were such an important part of life in Rome, specifically right in the city of Rome, because your average citizen actually really benefited from paying taxes. Okay, so if we're paying taxes, there's things like they had a massive sewage system in Rome that was kept up. So sewage would get out of the city and go to the swamps. The peace of the Pax Romana, the peace of Rome, being a citizen within Rome, you were protected. The doling out of grain for the poor. There was actually a storage of grain that the poor could take advantage of. So there are all these things that benefited the citizens. So if you have Christians going, well, I'm a citizen of heaven, I'm not going to pay my taxes. What are you saying to your neighbor? You're saying, I don't care whether you get
about your livelihood.
I don't care about your livelihood. Yeah. I don't care about your protection on the high seas. All things that taxes went towards. Now, we don't think about that very often today. But so for a Christian to say, I'm not going to pay my taxes anymore, said, I don't love my neighbor. Okay. And so, and if with that in mind, if we continue on in this text, he's basically going, don't be at this far in that says, I'm not connected to my neighbor anymore. There's a burst right through, give your taxes, but that's not all. Give even more. Continue with this debt of love that can never, ever, ever be fully paid. So, and it's a fact of history that Christians were often looked at to go, wow, they worship a different king, but they are the best citizens. They love their neighbors better than anyone else. In fact, Roman officials were writing each other in 2nd, 3rd century going, we need to treat our citizens like the Christians treat our citizens because they do a better job than we do. So that it's a call to not cut ourselves off from our world and the government but to push even further through than your average citizen and love more deeply.
Okay.
Whew.
Wow.
Sorry, man. That's
Yeah.
a fire hose.
A lot of context, but we need it, right?
Absolutely.
And, oh man. So, I mean, man, when we think about just our relationship to the state or politics as Christians, like it's such a complex thing and we can't do it justice in like 10 minutes here. But like, as we think even just maybe it's not explicitly in the text, but how are we as believers to, potentially affect political and social change while not being like jaded people who don't represent Christ well? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah,
and what's the role
that's very good.
of us within society like that?
Again, and I think you said political and social change. And I think when we get those backwards, we get in trouble. So the kingdom of God does not move forward from prime ministers and politics and petitions. It never has. Yeah. It's always moved forward from the bottom up, not the top down. And that's the subversive love of Christ, right? It's flipping the world on its head. It's canonically giving up. And so I think, again, going along with the text, that the way social change happens is by loving our neighbor, is not by trying to impose morality or impose and get us back to the Christian nation that we call ourselves, or the America might call themselves.
And why is that a problem? Like, quickly.
Why is imposing?
Like becoming a Christian nation. Like,
well, first of all, what does that mean? If Christianity, as we understand it, is an individual saying, "I am in allegiance to Christ, the Lamb on the throne," that can't be imposed. And we've seen this throughout history. When it is imposed, we get Christendom. We get people who will attach themselves with a label, but the Spirit is not in them, and they are not truly living a life in allegiance to Christ. They're living in allegiance to their chieftain or their king, who has said, under my authority, you're a Christian. Well, that's
like Constantine's empire.
Yeah, exactly. Or even earlier chieftains in Germanic tribes when early Christians would go there. So it's and we even see this in the revivals in England and the U.S., where this emotion would catch people up and they would all be brought in. This quick prayer and a stamp, and very soon they were back to where they started. The revivals kind of faded out, and when it's imposed and it's brought in with kind of from top down pushed on you, right. It doesn't stick, and it's not authentic. It's not the way of Jesus. And throughout history, you never saw Paul write about how we have to get into government and how we have to. Like it all started from the bottom up. And did he get there? He does. In Acts, he gets there, but it's not, he didn't start there and try to impose it down. He started simply by loving his neighbor, by ministering, and by being a missionary, planting churches. And as it says in Acts, and these early followers of Jesus flipped culture on its head, flipped societies on its head. And so it caused fear, not because they came in from the top down, because they grew from the bottom up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh man. Okay. So like even like kind of related to that, like I'm kind of pressing in here a bit. Like when we think about, things within culture that really grieve the heart of God, and we have like a voice. Yeah. Like how do we use that?
Yeah.
Potentially.
Yeah.
To affect change.
Yeah. And I think part of that pushes up against, well, obviously we can't submit to everything. There must be times, and we see that, Paul spent the majority of his ministry in prison. So it seems like, anyway, never done the actual number crunching, but he spent a significant amount of his time in prison. Why? Because he was defying the government, right? But you don't see him writing, I can't believe I'm here, or him saying, there's no way I'm going to prison. You have no right to throw me in prison. So there seemed to be this balance of, yes, I'll honor the government, but I will worship God. So, I'll fear God and worship the emperor, right? So there seemed to be this balance of understanding the authority of the government, but also, in light of that, still being obedient to the call of God. So I think there are times where we have to, and I think we need to use our judgment, where we do have to resist. So keeping the idea of the law of love in place, if we see laws that are dismissing the dignity of
image of God.
Yeah, and the image of God in the person and the dignity of the person, then those are laws that we will have to push back against as Christians. And traditionally, we always have. The abolishing of slavery, right? Starting in England. And again, that was a grassroots. Yes, it happened and it was pushed in the government, but really it was because the populace started changing. Their opinions started to change. It wasn't top down. It actually moved until the government's hand was forced, right? So I think when we see things that are dismissing the image of God in people and the dignity of humanity, then yes, we do as Christians need to push back. But then not be surprised that the government might do certain things and say, okay, well, this is as Paul did. Okay, well, this is or as Jesus, as a lamb led to the slaughter, did not open his mouth. He submitted to what the authorities did.
Right.
So
right. He endured the consequences. Yeah.
But underlying all of this, like I said, it's bookended by the idea of love.
Yeah,
so love is why we submit, and love is also why we might resist.
Right. The motive is love, and love fulfills the law.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I think part of what, I know we're almost done, part of what Paul's saying is it doesn't just fulfill the law of God. I think he's suggesting it actually fulfills the law of Rome.
Interesting. Like,
Because he starts listing, but then he says, in any other law, right? So I think he's actually suggesting you want to be a good citizen, love.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, hey, this has been a fire hose in 11 minutes or so. We'll turn it over to you, and we hope you have a great, not too charged, but really helpful, loving conversation about Romans 13.
We hope you enjoyed the teaching today. If you're wanting to follow along with our community group's discussion guide with your group, you can head to cachurch.ca/media, where you can find the discussion guide. Not only are there questions there related to the sermon, but there's also prayer prompts that relate to the passage or the topic that we were talking about, and practices that you can, on an individual level or a group level, begin integrating into your life to not only bring this knowledge into your mind, but to begin living it out.